In this video, we're going to be changing the front brake pads and rotors on a Nissan D22 Navara. First, you're going to want to remove the two bolts holding the brake caliper on. They're a 14mm bolt. Remove the brake pads and inspect for any uneven wear or damage. Then you're going to want to compress the brake pistons back into the brake caliper. Once you've done that, give everything a good clean spray down and wipe down with brake clean and put to the side. These brake pads aren't actually in that bad condition, but the customer was complaining about shaking through the steering when the brakes were applied, so we're going to change the rotors, new pads, so we know what we're working with. Remove the two guide pins on the back of the brake caliper mounting bracket and clean and re-grease. These are essentially the self-adjusters for the brake caliper. If these are seized up or don't move freely, you're going to get uneven brake wear on your brake pads. Remove the two 19mm bolts holding on the brake caliper mounting bracket. Give the brake caliper mounting bracket a thorough clean, especially on the guide plates where the brake pads sit. The customer also complained about excessive play in the wheel bearings, so we're going to inspect what the issue is with them too when doing this job. You're going to need to remove the 6 Allen bolts holding on the wheel locking hub to the face of the rotor. Remove the circlip that holds on the locking hub spline. There's going to be a number of screws, plates and brackets that you're going to remove going forward, so remember to keep everything organized and clean. Remove the 2 screws holding the locking plate onto the locking nut that holds on the wheel bearing. Normal operation, you should just be able to spin this one out pretty easy by giving it a few whacks with a screwdriver, but this locking nut was completely loose, so that may have been his problem. It looks like someone was previously in here but didn't do a very good job greasing up the wheel bearing, so we're going to get in there and clean everything up. Remove the 6 14mm bolts holding on the hub to the brake rotor. Using a magnet makes removing the bolts easy. Hold the hub and hit the rotor a few times and then the rotor should disconnect from the hub. Give the hub a good clean where the rotor mounts to it so there's no interference or any issues in the future. Give the spline on the face of the hub a good clean. Make sure to get all the old grease and make sure the mating surfaces are going to be nice and clean. Clean the ABS sensor also. Before installing the new rotor, it's important to clean all the old hardware. Make sure to get any old grease or debris off them all, including the wheel bearing, because we're going to be re-greasing that in a moment. Using high quality wheel bearing grease, apply a decent amount to the spline. I'm going to be manually repacking this wheel bearing as there's nothing wrong with it. This is the process how to do it. You essentially just pack it through until you see it coming from the other side. Make sure to be thorough and go all around the wheel bearing to ensure that it gets adequate lubrication. There is also another wheel bearing in the hub that was greased off camera, and also the inside of the hub was cleaned and fresh grease was applied. Reinstall the hub to the brake rotor. It's important to align the hub accurately to the holes on the brake rotor. You can do this by putting the bolts in and making them hand tight. Once they are hand tight, you can then use the hammer to whack the face of the hub to make sure it's flush on the rotor, then tighten down. Apply a small amount of Loctite to all the bolts before doing this. Reinstall the hub and make sure it sits flush before reinstalling the wheel bearing. The wheel bearing was placed in, but now I'm putting the locking nut on. The bearing will need to be preloaded before finishing tightening sequence, but once you get a feel for it, just play around and you'll know the correct feeling it should have in terms of not being too tight and also not being too loose. Try to clean as you go if you get any grease on the rotor. Before installing the locking hub, make sure to put the circlip back on and then apply some grease to the face of it. Keep checking the wheel just to make sure the preload feels right by spinning it every now and then. Reinstall the locking hub and tighten down. Now, because of how messy this job is, this is a good time to give everything a really good clean down. Wipe everything down with a fresh rag so there's no grease on any moving parts before you continue. Reinstall the brake caliper mounting bracket. Apply a small amount of Loctite to each of the bolts. The reason this brake rotor is black is because some manufacturers like to paint their rotors instead of putting a small amount of oil on to avoid corrosion. Apply a small amount of grease to the ends of the brake pads. This just ensures that there's no sticking and uneven wear in the future. Apply a small amount of Loctite to the 2 bolts that hold the brake caliper on. Once you've done that, tighten everything up, give everything a good clean, and go over your work and make sure the hub feels like it moves alright. If you like this video, please like, share and follow for more. Thanks.